Hi, I'm George Crump, Chief Marketing Officer with Verge-io. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about preparing your VMware environment for both major and minor disasters. And I'll explain the difference of those in a second. Most people that know me know I'm a bit of a disaster recovery nerd, but not great at networking. So I've asked our Senior Director of Development, Paul Hodges, to help me through with some of the networking stuff. Paul, thanks for helping out today.
No problem.
Glad I tackled you down in the hallway there.
I tried to get away.
Yeah, you never do though. All right, so if you look at this environment, right, I've got a basic, very basic VMware environment up and going. And what I want to do is kind of address the disaster recovery challenge, right? And I hear this all the time from customers. Okay, yeah, I know got to do disaster recovery, but it's expensive and I'm being asked to cut budgets and all this sort of stuff. I think that Verge-OS has a great way to get there. And so the first thing I always recommend to people is put in an on-prem DR instance. And where that becomes valuable, and we'll walk you through some of that, is if there's a disaster that occurs that doesn't wipe out the entire data center, a storage system fails, some of your servers go down, or a rack failure. Could also be something like a ransomware attack. There's a lot of things that are encompassed inside the data center that frankly are worse because the users still see all the lights blinking and they don't understand why they're not up and running. And then, of course, prepare for a long-term disaster. So let's take through that. So first, what I recommend is putting in a on-prem DR copy. Now, a lot of times people go, whoa, hang on, that's going to be expensive. Not with Verge-OS. Because of the efficiency of the product, you can literally take existing hardware, load our software on it, and it's an excellent on-prem DR copy. Now, Paul, take us through. So what we would do is we'd install Verge-OS, right? We'd get it up and running, maybe hopefully on 3 nodes. We could do less. We could do 2 nodes if we really had to. We'd put some storage in those nodes to make sure we could receive the VMware VMs. And then how do I get those VMware VMs copied and backed up into my Verge-OS environment?
Yeah, so first thing you would do is you would create a VMware backup service in the Verge operating system.
Okay.
You would need an admin credential to log into VMware so that we can have visibility, read access to your data stores, get lists of virtual machines, and once you plug those in, we will just ingest all of that information and you can make a logical choice as to what virtual machines do I want, what am I interested in, what's throwaway. You can pick and choose what you actually want to replicate.
So I can pick the most important VMs, for example, that sort of stuff. And then what about, now obviously that we use that also, of course, to do migration when people are switching over to us fully, which of course you'll want to do it at some point. But we have the ability to schedule that so it can happen on a very frequent basis as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would recommend too is setting up those schedules. The high priority virtual machines, have them run once an hour if you can. Okay. Because in the event of a DR, you don't know when it's going to happen. You want to be able to take the least amount of penalty as possible of rolling back.
I'm the DR nerd. Let's keep that straight. All right. So and then the next thing we want to do is we want to bring in our offsite DR, because you do need to prepare for big disasters like hurricanes, fires, floods, things like that. And basically it's the same thing, right, Paul? Start probably with 3 nodes. Again, this can be, I don't recommend you go out and use like 8-year-old dusty servers. They got to have some life to them. But again, they don't need to be the same servers you're using in production. Again, one of the benefits of Verge-OS is we've totally abstracted from the hardware, so we're much more flexible, I think would be the right way to say it there. Mm-hmm. Now, as I make this connection, so here what I'm doing is I'm replicating from the on-prem Verge-OS to the off-site Verge-OS. How does that connection work?
So your initial backups are going from VMware to Verge-OS. Mm-hmm. From that point, VMware doesn't even need to be in the mix,
right? Because
we're going to use our synchronization technology, which is globally dedupe aware. So as you're replicating from VMware to Verge, we replicate offsite. The next backup window that comes in, just like we're doing with VMware where we only get what changed, we're going to do the same thing in our synchronization to go offsite.
Okay, perfect. So then, all right, so now I've got everything set up. I'm doing your recommendation. I'm maybe making an hourly backup. I've got all that protected. I can use our snapshot technology to get some immutability there as well, correct? Mm-hmm. All right, so now I've got some protection in case something really bad happens to the system like a ransomware attack. So let's have some fun and go through a couple of disasters, right? Let's say we lose the lose the storage system. And now, in that environment, at least what I drew, that's not a good day for IT, right? So what has to happen here to move this system into production and start getting users back online again?
So step one would have been preparation, which is the big one, is
Yeah.
getting your network ready for migrating.
Okay.
Generally in a VMware environment, it'll be pretty simple.
Okay.
You'll have a couple VLANs that will be pre-configured in our operating system.
Okay.
From that point on, it's very, very easy. Data store goes down, you go into Verge operating system, you go to that same service where we backed everything up, you click on the list of virtual machines you want, import, they're now pulled into our live operating system, you can play and boot them up.
And then from the user and the application owners and stuff that are up there trying to access stuff, do they need to change anything?
The only thing that we will run into sometimes is driver issues.
Okay.
There might be, if it's using an LSI emulated controller that might not be bootable, you might have to change a driver, but it's very minimal. You do it once on each VM that has a problem, and you're up and running.
And as part as so let's back up. I kind of went to blowing things up too soon, maybe. as part of our testing, we could have tested all that out as well.
Absolutely.
Correct?
In an isolated environment without network plugged in,
Right.
you can run through this entire simulation without actually touching or affecting your VMware environment.
Right. So that's the other thing that I probably skipped over is you can do all your DR testing here isolated and not mess up with even the backup process, right? We can create a whole virtual instance that's kind of like a playground, right?
Yep, and you can test this on the offsite as well.
Right.
It's the same process.
And success in DR is testing, so that's a good thing. All right, so let's say the storage system stays up and running, and we lose some of those VMware servers. Kind of the same situation at that point, right? We're just going to fail over and keep going, correct?
Yep, same process.
All right, so let's take the big one, the one that everybody likes to write about right now is ransomware. Ransomware hits, it somehow gets here and encrypts, if not all, most of that storage system. I'm assuming at some point we're probably, especially on an hourly schedule, we're backing up encrypted VMs. How do we help a customer through that situation?
So by setting up this your snapshot policy and what you're backing up, you would have predefined that how long do you want to hold on to all of this data for.
Okay.
So that's just at the VMware backup service level.
Okay.
We also have another layer of protection, which is our cloud snapshots.
Okay.
So in the event of, maybe you didn't notice this for 3 or 4 days, and that's all you were really holding on to for your hourly snapshots, in theory, most systems, that's gone.
Right.
That's not the case with our environment because we have another layer of protection where we snapshot the entire operating system, meaning the user management, virtual machines, tenants, everything all into one snapshot that takes about 15 milliseconds to take.
Okay.
So you could then roll the Verge operating system back to before the VMware environment was even affected and start from there.
All right. And I know that you've taken some customers, a couple I think, through an actual where they have been attacked by ransomware, and you've been able to get them back up and running in no time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you're speaking from experience.
It's very quick too.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So that covers that, and that, by the way, that's why I'm such a big proponent of having an on-premises DR box, because those 3 situations that I mentioned don't affect the entire data center, right? There's probably parts of the data center where just fine. And so failing everything over to a remote site, you're just adding layers of difficulty that you don't necessarily need to do. So this is why I like that idea. We could run, straight connect, and you wouldn't need an on-prem copy if you don't think it's a good idea. But because of the cost value here, it's a great idea. Now, let's take the extreme example, Paul. All this gets gone, right? Hurricane, flood, earthquake, whatever, bad day. What's the effort like here? Is it very similar to what we just did with the on-prem?
It is very similar. Once again, I'm going to back up to networking.
Yep.
Always plan ahead of time. That's what DR is all about.
Right.
Know what could go wrong and how do you account for it.
Right.
Let's assume that this link right here is a layer 2 connection.
Yeah.
You probably already had all those VLANs in that network or a VPN already set up in the offsite DR.
Okay.
And if that's the case, very simple. Same thing we did here on the on-prem.
Okay.
You just import the VMs, you hit play, and you're good.
All right.
If the IP addresses are different between the 2 environments, you'll need to update DNS, your public DNS, to ensure all your services are accessible.
Okay.
But once again, this is all stuff that you plan ahead of time.
And that's all built into Verge-OS, right? That's not something that we have to do externally. We can manage all that networking and things like that internal to the software, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So then the last thing I wanted to end with is, hopefully you're not dealing with a storage outage, a ransomware attack, server failures fire, flood, hurricane every single day. If you are, you probably need to consider another career choice. But you can leverage this for other things. So let's say you have, we talked about DR testing. That's the number one thing you could leverage this for. The second thing is you could use this to do test dev work. You could use it to do reporting against, because we have all the copy, right? We could just restore it, bring it up, and you're ready to go. We, of course, eventually hope that someday you'll run, that this VMware environment will become Verge-OS. You can use this to test and validate your workloads running in our environment, because now you've got all the data here, and it allows you to kind of really put that through a good stress test. I think one of the challenges when we deal with infrastructure is big, and you can only test so much in 30, 45 days. This gives you sort of an extended trial while it's adding value and protecting your environment from a disaster. Paul, anything else?
I think we covered it.
All right. So there you have it. With Verge-OS, you can start with and add value to your existing VMware environment and add a high quality disaster recovery solution while setting up your environment to be able to test and develop and ensure that Verge-OS is going to work for you when you move to production. Thanks for joining us today. I'm George Crump, Chief Marketing Officer with Verge-io.